welcome back to Keto and Krime and Thought Crime. We are back with, I believe, the fourth novel in Chad Daybell's Standing on in Holy Places series, Keys to the Kingdom. As I said, the Rise of Zion was really tough to get through because it was just a whole lot of, building up to some kind of climax, which never really came, which was basically a couple of guys breaking into another guy's room with a snake and causing him to jump out a window. That was the climax. This one has a bit more action in it, so it was a little easier to get through, but it is certainly not a masterpiece. But we're going to talk about it. And I hope you all had a wonderful holiday and a wonderful start off of 2021. Happy New Year. I've got a lot of really good things planned for the channel. I spent my time over my break, in addition to filming a couple of videos on the Nashville bombing, to basically writing scripts. I've got a month's worth of scripts written in the can, ready to go, and I'm going to be doing a filming marathon over the next few weekends to make sure we get these things out to you on time. So anyway, with that being said, we're about to get into it. If you'd like to join my wonderful patrons and channel members, which I thank so much for everything, you can find those links below and above. And you can also find keys, my merch store, everything down there. Please feel free to join us. There's going to be some wonderful perks coming up for them this year. Also, what are you fidgeting with, Tracy? This is a snowball. My mother-in-law brought like 3 boxes of these because she's heavily into crafting YouTube channels. In fact, on my patron and channel member thank you montage coming up in just a second, I'm going to be showing you pictures of her Christmas spread, now followed by her winter spread, and then will be, again, her Valentine's Day spread. She's basically turning the tree and all the holiday decorations into different holidays throughout the year. Like I said, she's been off from work, so she's been watching a marathon of these crafting YouTube channels. But anyway, I stole one of these. It's a snowball for inside snowball fights, and it's a perfect stress ball. So I love it. But anyway, with that being said, let's jump into this book. Thank you so much, everyone. Keys to the Kingdom. I read it on Kindle. It's kind of surprising. All of his books, all of Daybell's books from the Times of Turmoil series, the first series I read, were all on Audible, narrated by his son Seth. Whereas these are all on Kindle. I guess he decided never to narrate these, but so I had to read them all on Kindle. They all hover around 200, 210 pages-ish. They take about 5 hours to read. And I think that's why I had such a hard time getting through these, because with Audible, I can kind of busy myself with work and, just taking some notes occasionally. With this, I have to pay 100% attention to the book. And I think that's why it took me so long to get through these, because some of them were quite torturous. But anyway, as we remember he starts out with kind of a, follow-up. He always does like a follow-up from the previous book, so that's where this starts. So it's been about a year since the events of Rise of Zion. They caused the Shimmer to commit suicide, all this stuff. But basically, now the Saints of Zion have pretty much built New Jerusalem up. They're working on the New Jerusalem temple. they're about to dedicate it because remember Mark helped the Native Americans, the Native Americans from Arizona drive all that hidden Mormon gold back to plate the temple with. It talks about, of course, the new the new president is fully taken power. The new prophet of the Mormon Church, and then it talks about how many of our beloved characters have expanded. So we go back and we first hear about Miko, who is now pretty much a spy at the Kremlin in Moscow, spying on the coalition. And he's sending letters back to the Mormons every day to let them know what's going on. And it literally refers to this war that was, 30,000 invading troops into the United States. It literally talks about that, calls it World War III. So that's what World War III is. 30,000 troops, 15,000 on one coast, 15,000 on the other coast, trying to crush Americans in between. That's World War III in Chad's mind. Anyway, the coalition was still definitely around. They wouldn't be satisfied, led by Iran and some Middle Eastern countries as well as China and Russia. They would not be satisfied until both Israel and America were crushed under the weight of their feet. And so as a result, the saints of the world, the Christian and Jewish believers of the world, were moving ever closer together. You were starting to see little villages popping up all over the world. Lots of people migrating to North America to be part of Zion. And so you saw a lot of migration. Also, celestial cities were popping up all over North America, some parts of Europe, and especially Central and South America, with new ones in Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, Brazil, and Argentina. Several of our former characters were called into leadership positions with some of the action that's happening, of course. So it sounds like the huge concentration of the saints are in this hemisphere, or in the Western Hemisphere. So we start to see a lot of concentration of Christian power. Tad North has been named a bishop of an expanding area of believers outside New Jerusalem, so suburbs. He's been called to be the saint of the suburbs, and he and his wife Emma North have moved to that suburb to be able to do their mission work there. In addition, Emma, who's ever a scholarly woman, is helping them translate those plates. Remember those plates that Mathoni and Josh Brown brought from Siberia? Remember those? Well, by the Lost 10 Tribes, remember all the Siberian Mormons? Yeah, she's working on translating those plates and manuscripts as well. Their oldest son, David, is now 20. He is serving a mission in the far area of Missouri where they put the 10 tribes of Siberian Mormons as far away from everybody else as they could get, evidently. And so they've put them all there, and David is working to help convert them all to fully Mormon. Meanwhile, he was dating Phyllis. Remember Phyllis, the young girl from Maryland that Mark Dalton and his wife, Doug and Emma's grandparents had taken in because Doug had brought her there from Maryland, when he evacuated the D.C. temple and she had seen her family murdered. Anyway, she's fully converted to Mormonism and she's now attending classes at BYU Zion, and he hopes she's not dating very much while he's away. Oh, David. Their younger son, Charles, is 16. He's attending high school that focuses on horticulture and spends much of his time gardening, whereas Leah is 13 and just happy to be a teenager and be alive. She has intelligence. So, meanwhile, Doug and Becky Dalton, remember Doug is Emma's brother, and his wife Becky are living in the heart of New Jerusalem, and he is part of the 144,000 high priests, and he feels that he'll be dispatched on a mission very soon and may be gone for a long time. So they are preparing for that. And Becky is teaching school because that's literally all Becky does in any of these books is teach school. Definitely gender roles here. Daniel is, remember their little son Daniel, the one that was born without, with a deformed arm and without a leg, or vice versa. I can't really remember. But anyway, he's now preschool age, about 3 years old. He's spry and spunky, and he walks with the help of a crutch, but can't talk. I mean, Chad, you're just heaping it on this poor little guy. Anyway, so that's what they're doing. Then we go to Josh and Kim Brown. Remember, Josh and Kim were the ones that went to Guatemala and helped lead a huge caravan of Guatemalans up through Mexico, Central America, up into Arizona, and then over to Missouri. Anyway, so they have twins now, Timothy and Tina, who are almost 2. Josh is expecting to be sent overseas, just like Doug is, and they will possibly be separated because remember, he's one of the ones they sent to lead the Siberian Mormons back. So he's expecting to have to do something as exciting and relevant as that in the near future. And it just so happens that happens sooner than later. About the time the first chapter opens, Elder Josh Brown is now on a private jet zooming across the Mediterranean Sea with another Mormon elder by the name of Colton Negus heading toward Jerusalem. They are evidently the 2 judges, or the 2 apostles that the book of Revelation speaks about, that will be in Jerusalem and help convert the Jews and raise up the temple and give Satan and the Antichrist all kinds of hell. That's them. In case you're not seeing where this is going, that's them. They're Mormon. And I want you to know, I'm not making fun of the Mormon faith. I have a lot of friends that are LDS. I think they are the best people around. But I'm making fun of Chad Daybell's view on LDS. Just please keep that in mind. Not knocking anyone's religion. I will criticize all religions for their shortfallings, but I'm not making fun of Mormons in general. I'm just making fun of Chad Daybell. Please know that. They're all really nervous because they're going to be flying into Israeli airspace, and they fear with the heightened alert that Israel has been on with all the other Middle Eastern countries now joining up with the coalition that they might be shot down immediately. And so they feel a little bit better because the Apostle John the Revelator, the one that was exiled to Patmos and wrote the book of Revelation, is their pilot. He has his pilot's license, y'all. And his own plane. Much like, Mathoni, who was also a transcended being, had that blue Nissan, remember, from the last movie. John got a plane. He got a plane and a pilot's license. Anyway, he's telling them this might indeed be a one-way trip, but they will make it. And as they approach Israel, he starts pointing out historic landmarks like Nazareth, like the Mount of Olives, like the Valley of Megiddo, like all this stuff that he is flying over. And then he kind of bypasses Jerusalem, and they want to know, why are you bypassing Jerusalem? Oh, the security in Jerusalem is going to be really tight. There's no way we can make it there. So we're just going to land as close as we can in the desert outside Jerusalem, and you're going to walk. What? At least that's what Colton and Josh thought, that they were going to land and then they would walk. But no, they're not landing. John the Revelator points out a couple of parachutes and tells them to strap up. They gonna jump. You can't make this shit up, people. I promise you this is what this book says, that they're about to parachute into the Israeli desert. So anyway, they put on the parachutes, they get ready, and they jump. However, Israeli anti-aircraft gunners see the airplane and start firing at it, and while they somehow manage to miss both parachuting people out of the plane that are coming down, they manage to take out the tail of the plane, and John has to do an emergency landing across like a mountain range or something. I don't know, but anyway, it's something to that effect. But they managed to miss Josh and Colton, even though they are parachuting down to the ground. I guess those Israeli soldiers were stormtroopers, because that's about as good as aim as they actually had. Anyway, so they parachute down, and Colton gets kind of tied up in his parachute, but manages to still have a soft landing. Josh lands, unhooks himself, goes, finds Colton, unhooks him, and then by that time, John has rejoined them. Remember, John's a transcendent being. I don't understand why he couldn't just zap them where they needed to go, but anyway, the parachute was a much more dramatic effect. Anyway, so they parachute down. He says, we got to huff it over to this farmhouse and hide from these soldiers, because they're going to be coming in looking for you. So they huff it to this farmhouse. While they're there, they start talking about where they're going to go when they go to Jerusalem. And they say, oh, you're going to go to the BYU Jerusalem Center. Brigham Young University evidently has a center in Old Jerusalem. Is this true? I didn't bother to look it up. I guess I should have, but that's where they're headed. I was like, wait a damn minute. But anyway, that's where they're headed. So they get to the farmhouse, and John immediately takes them down to the vegetable cellar and says, hide here. And they go, wait, aren't you staying with us? And John, oh no, I can't be around if these soldiers show up, but you're going to hide here. Yeah. So he pushes them in there. There's cobwebs everywhere, and he locks them in and then transcends wherever he's transcending to. And then they hear Israeli soldiers on the property. So they just be quiet, and the Israeli soldiers call out to them, we know you're here. For some reason, they don't search the cellar. I guess the doors were well hidden. And so they leave, but not before they leave a little present, an explosive, which blows up part of the house. And so when they finally get out of the cellar and dig their way out, there's John, who just left them there. Guys, this is the most ironic part of the whole book. John is there with a tricycle. Not a kid's tricycle, but a big, tricycle like you see in movies of people in the Middle East and Far East, pedaling with the kind of like a rickshaw, but this one, had the two wheels in the back, one wheel in front, but there was also a cart attached to it. So he hides them in this cart filled with vegetables and groceries and fruit and other stuff, and just pedals across the desert on a rickshaw. Daybell kept calling it a tricycle, but I'm sure it was a rickshaw. They just pedal it right across the desert to the gates of Jerusalem. And when they get to the gates of Jerusalem, of course, the security stops them and says, hey, where are you going? He says, well, I didn't bring my identification. You've always let me in here. And the guard said, well, I'm sure we have. I know you're probably a merchant, but with all the security risks that we have, I can't let you in. So John takes a bag of apples and bribes the guard. Evidently food, there's still a lot of food shortages going on, because remember, we're in the end times here. So he bribes the guard with a bag of apples, and the guard lets him in, and they pedal down the streets of Jerusalem to BYU Jerusalem Center. At the Jerusalem Center, they meet Rabbi Benjamin Cohen, who is... Anytime Chad Daybell talks about Jewish people, he uses the most common, almost stereotypical names that anyone else that writes about fictional Jewish characters use. Horowitz, Cohen, Shapiro. I mean, you couldn't... I realize those are probably like the Smith and the Jones of Yiddish and Hebrew. I get that. And I get that that's a common name, but it's just so... He can't even be bothered to come up with another Jewish name. He just uses the most common ones. That's just lazy. Anyway, so Ben Cohen is a rabbi, but he's also a believer in the book of Revelation, which I don't understand because he's Jewish. But anyway, he is expecting them, and they talk for a minute, and he tells John, because I guess John knows this guy, he tells the three of them about how Israel's doing okay because they had a whole lot of solar power. They had stored up a lot of crops and game meats from the previous harvest, previous hunting season, whatever. He makes Jerusalem and Israel sound like a Middle East, like a like a middle age, like a country that's still stuck in the Middle Ages, not realizing that many of the Middle Eastern countries, especially Israel and like United Arab Emirates, are highly technologically advanced. But he makes them sound like they're still like in Old Testament times sometimes, because it's supposed to be shocking that they have solar power and technology and have been able to, store up all this surplus food. Anyway, so he begins to tell them that the Jewish people in Jerusalem are getting antsy about all of the about all the Muslim people that are there, and that they are talking about retaking over the Dome of the Rock, which is the Muslim mosque that's built over where Solomon's temple supposedly was, and that they are talking about simply taking it over and rebuilding their temple. So, of course, Colton and Josh are a little bit weary of this. They're like, won't this start a big old conflict? And they're like, well, they don't really care anymore. They're throwing caution to the wind. They ain't having it anymore. But he does say that there is a peace-loving man that is world-renowned for being a giver of peace. He's a celebrity, reality TV star, all this stuff. His name is Elias of Syria. He was educated in the United States, came from a wealthy family in Syria, and he is kind of here to negotiate on the behalf of the Muslims with the Jews to prevent this from happening. So Ben Cohen says that perhaps if they talk to him, that they could perhaps come up with some kind of compromise, because I guess this guy Ben Cohen is the ruler of the Jewish people. But anyway, so they agree to meet with Elias of Syria. So Ben leads them off to meet this Elias of Syria. Meanwhile, we shoot back to New Jerusalem in Missouri, where we find the prophet, president of the Mormon Church, who was never named. The old one was, but this one wasn't. That he's making a speech talking about how he had a vision of South and Central America, how so many little towns and areas are just wasting away with no one there, no one, utilizing them for good. And he called upon the saints in Zion to leave the comforts of Zion and once again journey eastward and westward and even southward to revitalize a lot of these areas and prepare them for the return of Christ. Bring electricity back to them, bring food back to them, bring the people that are still camping out, not knowing what has happened, that the war with the coalition is over, to bring them all back in. So he says that he wants them to start with a few cities in, of course, Utah that are special to him and will be special based on the prophecies of Joseph Smith, and he lists them off there, of course. Rexburg, of course, Idaho Falls, Ponticello, Logan, Brigham City, Ogden, Bountiful, Salt Lake City, Draper, American Fork, Provo, Springville, Spanish Fork, Payson, Nephi, and Manti. And additionally, all these cities in and out of the Rocky Mountains will be added to the list in the spring. So these are the cities they want to start with. So they start looking at saints that have lived in these areas before. Salt Lake City, Springville, Rexburg, whatever. And he turns to the 144,000 prophets that says, you should go back to your hometowns and revitalize them. Of course, this means Mark in Springville, and Doug and Tad in either Salt Lake City or Provo, wherever it was they lived. And says that they will have convoys of solar-powered buses and trucks leaving immediately, like that night. These people don't waste any time. And they should head and take anybody that wants to go with them to re-inhabit these cities and towns. So the Norths and the Daltons talk, and they realize it's probably better if they all go to Springville, since it all has ties to them, and kind of revitalize it there. The only one that is not gung-ho about this whole plan is Michelle, Mark's wife. That's Emma and Doug's mother. She's not wanting to go. She likes living in the city. She says she's finally comfortable again after everything they've been through, and she would prefer not to go out there because there's probably still raiders. Remember Sharon, the one they snuck in and scared with the snake, and he committed suicide, that had all of the the huge armies. She fears that some of those people are still out there, which they probably are, let's be honest. And she just doesn't want to risk it, nor the lives of her children or grandchildren. But even though she's arguing it, she walks out, takes a little walk just to cool off, and then the Holy Spirit comes down and convicts her of her selfishness and says that the Lord will protect them. Yes, some people will die, but most people will live, and they will be able to bring the glory of God back to these cities. And all I can say is that pesky spirit. So she relents and says she will go. So they start making preparations to leave immediately. Then back to Old Jerusalem in Israel. Josh and Colton and Ben are waiting to meet with Elias. Now they, of course, go into Ben's huge story of who Elias is and how he got to where he was. He was born in Damascus, Syria, one of the closer cities to Israel. And a millionaire there took an interest in him because he was so bright and industrious, and actually paid for him to go to the United States and study at the Ivy League school, Columbia. And while there, he became a celebrity of sorts because he became basically kind of some Hare Krishna kind of person, where he dressed in robes and sandals and said he was a vegetarian and was celibate, and started rallying all the Columbia, Ivy League, very easily influenced students around him. And they actually put up a tent city in Central Park and just became the celebrity of sorts. Evidently, somehow, he got into this war of words with New York Yankees baseball star Alex Rodriguez, because Alex called him out on his BS, and Elias got mad, so they ended up with this whole war of words. And Donald Trump put together a meeting of them at Yankee Stadium.
The intelligence agencies allowed any information that turned out to be so false and fake out.
And it was there that they had kind of a home run derby kind of thing. Remember old home run derby where they would just, evidently Elias beat Alex Rodriguez in a home run derby, and they called it the Miracle of Yankee Stadium. And as a result, Elias won worldwide fame and just became kind of a reality show star. He started doing a college tour like Milo Yiannopoulos and Ben Shapiro, and going around and speaking on his plan for unifying the world at all these colleges, and as a result became a worldwide celebrity. And now his whole point in life is to bring peace to the Middle East and unity to the world by unifying everyone under one common religion, one common leader. Basically, sounds like the Antichrist to me. But he was specifically there in Israel to try to abate the plans of the Jewish people for rebuilding by force the Jewish temple, the Temple of Solomon on the Dome of the Rock. And so Josh and Colton finally get in to talk with him. Elias talks with them a few minutes about the United States and how things are there, almost like he's trying to gather some information. And then he urges them, as American ambassadors of such, to prove to the people of Israel that America is still alive over there, to help him negotiate with the Jewish leaders to prevent what they are about to do, which will insult the entire Islamic world and, of course, bring in military attacks on Israel. And he's just pressing them to get the people of Israel to listen to him and not do what they are about to do. And that's pretty much the whole gist of the conversation. Colton, Josh, and Ben leave, and on the way back to the BYU Jerusalem Center, Josh and Colton discuss and said that he just seemed a little fakey-dakey to them, and that perhaps there was a darkness in him that no one really understood. And what was this plan he had to bring peace to Israel? It just seemed very spooky. Meanwhile, we cut back to Moscow and the Kremlin, where the leaders of the coalition are kind of rebuilding a little bit after learning that their American forces were defeated. So they're sitting there discussing another plan to cause the downfall of America. Now, all of a sudden, Miko, remember Mikhail Petrov, who is there as a kind of a spy for the Mormons, realizes that all of a sudden he's been given the gift of interpreting tongues, which means he can listen and understand other languages. So he's able to understand all of the side conversations and everything and really understand what's going on. And he overhears that when they did their first invasion of America, that they had bribed American leaders not to help them, but these leaders were patriots. Daybell was perfectly clear about that, but they were foolish. And so they basically bribed them to have a better outlook on foreign powers than they should, and how their lack of enthusiasm about retaliating allowed the coalition to just walk up. So I think Chad's trying to put out a plea here for stronger foreign policy, which that's always a good thing. And that's how they were able to invade and try to conquer the USA. But because Mormons are true patriots, they were beaten back. And the leader of the coalition, which is described as the Russian president, so I guess he's talking about Putin here, is the leader and is talking about how now that corrupt United States government is gone, the U.S. military is essentially gone, and also because of the way that only the people that were able to stake out on their own and fight back and kind of live off the land are still there, that all of the leeches of American society were also gone. I think Chad's probably talking about poor people, welfare recipients, because that's the kind of language they kind of use, the leeches of society. So he's grouping poor people in with politicians. So, Chad, you're just evil and messed up, dude. Anyway, so now, because all of those people are gone, everything that made America weak is gone, that it's going to be harder than ever to conquer America, because now you only have the strong left. And so they're trying to come up with a way to make this happen, because they still want to get America. Chad, I understand that there are people that abuse welfare. Absolutely. And those people should be thrown off welfare. Absolutely. But we could easily do that if we just enforce the laws that we have about doing proper inspections. But when you start talking about people in mass saying that they're leeches on society, you're not. I have a couple of family members on disability because they were hurt doing hard manual labor and can't work anymore. So they're on disability. Are you calling them a leech on society even though they worked 20 years paying in their money? Are you talking about people that are working poor, that maybe work 2 or 3 minimum wage jobs and just can't make it and need a little bit of assistance? There's a lot of us out there who have been. I, at one point in time, lived in my car when I was just between college because I made some foolish decisions and ended up living out of my car for about 3 weeks. I mean, I'm not saying that I was, as bad as anyone else, but, I was able to get back on my feet, but I was contemplating going down and seeing if I could qualify for food stamps or Section 8 housing at that time. Luckily, I had a friend that let me stay with them, and I didn't have to. But what I'm saying is, Chad, you're lumping people in who are very industrious people with people that, small, very small majority of people that need public assistance are leeches. Very small, minuscule part. Okay? Now, let's move on. And I know a lot of my libertarian friends are saying, why are you, welfare should be a private charity thing. I agree. I think we need more private charities that would be able to do this kind to do this kind of work, and there's plenty. My mother-in-law's church has an outreach to the homeless and the hungry, and they don't proselytize to them. They just do good works for the sake of doing good works. There are lots of good people out there doing that sort of thing, but it's not enough. It's never been enough. If it had been enough, you wouldn't need the social welfare system. Now, I think there's stuff that we can do to kind of weed out the people that take advantage. Absolutely. But I do believe there needs to be some kind of, safety net there to help, because you might find yourself in trouble. And that's the reason I try not to judge others. Reforms, yes, we can always make it better, but we don't need to take it to one extreme. Somewhere in the middle, there's a compromise that works. And that's the last thing I'm going to say. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get on a soapbox, but his whole lumping in of people, are just, it made me mad. I'm sorry, made me mad. But Putin, or whoever this Russian president is, says that they need more troops, more volunteers, because they're going to be facing the best of the best in America. So he says they really need to work hard to bring in the countries that are holding out, not joining the coalition, such as the United Kingdom hasn't joined, lots of the Scandinavian countries, so Norway, Denmark, Holland, Finland, Greenland, Iceland, anywhere that the Viking may have sat his foot is not joining, as well as Israel. Israel is not joining either. So their next immediate goal is to crush Israel. Crush Israel. They don't want Israel. All these Muslim countries that are Islamic countries that are in the coalition want to crush Israel. And then hopefully that will be enough to scare the rest of the European countries who haven't joined the coalition to join. And Miko is able to send this information back to Missouri, to New Jerusalem. And then we cut back to New Jerusalem, where a convoy of solar-powered trucks and buses are leaving to head for Springville. It takes them several days to get there, but there was about 350 people in the group. Meanwhile, they finally make it to Springville, and they go to the Springville Temple, and there they meet a man by the name of Schultz, who has been the bishop there. He was in kind of an advanced, like away team, like in Star Trek, that they sent, and they have managed to restore electricity to a few blocks of the city center. They also realized that Doug's old childhood friend, Jason Williams, is among the ones that are living there, and they have this discussion about where the new 350 people should go, and the bishop tells them, well, we've only restored electricity to the immediate area around the temple, so try to choose a house within 6 blocks of the temple. And Mark and Michelle are happy because they realize their old home is within that radius. And they asked the bishop, is it possible to reclaim their old homes? And this is what he said. That since property rights are a function of the state, that the state no longer exists, and therefore property rights are no longer a thing, but he does believe in first come, first serve. So if you can go to your house and it's empty, take it. If you go there and there's already someone in it, you might want to just talk with them and see if they'll give it to you. If not, you need to choose a different house, because it's first come, first serve. I love how Chad returns to socialism and communism when it suits him. Otherwise, he's a pure capitalist. I don't get you, Chad. But anyway, he tells them to go out, find a house, and then come back to the community center because they're making sandwiches. There's always sandwiches in these things, I swear to God. So Mark and Michelle are able to get their old home, and of course Doug and Becky take the house right next door. And while they're starting to kind of clean up the house a little bit, they open a closet and a bunch of old newspapers and magazines fall out, including a headline from what was the Springville Times, talking about thousands of Mormons still in hiding in the mountains. And evidently a reporter had tried to find one of the camps and couldn't. And the whole article was just trouncing on the Mormon church and how they were being separatists and things like that. And while they went about kind of cleaning up the house, she kept a few of these magazines and newspapers and said it would be interesting to read them now since none of this stuff even existed anymore. And then she went into this whole, Becky, she went into this whole thing about how the people of the old world were so materialistic and so into what celebrities do, and all these celebrities are probably dead, long dead now, and how it's just going to be interesting to read about it. Yet you want to keep them and read them, girl. So there you go. So anyway, they go back for sandwiches, and while they're there, they have a meeting talking about the government that will kind of rule over all these new revitalized cities, and how each one will have a representative in a kind of a Senate, House of Representatives, and how that's how the government will be ran, but it will all be under the control of New Jerusalem, i.e. the Mormon Church, i.e. we got ourselves a theocracy. Fast forward a few months, and all these cities have completely been revitalized with gardens. Remember, it's still the law of consecration. We share what we have, so everybody has a garden. Everybody raises some livestock. Everybody works on homes, teaches children, whatever. There is like a community spirit, which I can dig that. But basically, so we fast forward to November of whatever year this is supposed to be. And it's getting near what would have been Thanksgiving. Even though the United States of America no longer exists, the theocracy wants to pay tribute to the country that allowed, they all came from, and actually asked the people of these cities, these revitalized cities and towns, to celebrate Thanksgiving on the traditional fourth Thursday of November. And as a result, the government ships frozen turkeys to every family that live in these. So I guess Butterball survives. Butterball survived the apocalypse. They did the same thing for Christmas, even though they admitted that the Savior wasn't born in winter, in December. He was actually born in the springtime. They didn't see any reason to do away with Christmas, so they still celebrated Christmas Day. Instead of like materialistic presents, they did away with all the commercial, all the Santa Claus, all the fun stuff, and turned to, it just being simply a couple of days of worship with plays and pageants and plays about the Nephites and the Lamanites, and talking about Jesus' second coming. And they had their frozen butterball turkeys, maybe a honey baked ham or two, I don't know. But they still started celebrating the holidays. Meanwhile, back over in Israel, Christmas Day, Josh and Colton are laughing, saying, well, Santa Claus didn't bring us much this year, so let's kind of make our own little celebration. And they walked the path to the Garden of Gethsemane. They prayed in the path of Gethsemane. They actually talked to Jesus. Jesus appeared and talked to them. And then from there, they walked the path to where he was crucified and all of this stuff. And then to the place, the path that he walked when his body was resurrected. They got Christmas confused with Easter. Poor guys. But anyway, with that, I'm going to end part 1 of Keys to the Kingdom. I'll be back tomorrow with part 2, and we will pick up with whatever the diabolical plan is of the coalition. And with that being said, thank you so much for joining me today. Happy New Year. Love you all. Until next time. Keto and Krime.